Hello, my name is Janice B. Gordon, and this is Scale Your Sales Podcast. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, listed number 9 of 43 best podcasts for every sales professional. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert and awarded Red Tech strategist of 2024. In today's episode of Scale Your Sales Podcast, my guest explores how the science and data approach to revenue architecture is powered by AI, the adoption of AI, and is transforming modern sales leadership. He talks about how, in his role as CEO, it can help to design scalable, customer-centric growth systems that connect the science, technology, and drives predictable outcomes across all stages of the growth journey. My next guest is CEO of Verto, a UK SaaS platform, the number one solution powering portfolio, program, and project management, P3M, across the UK public sector. An entrepreneur and GTM leader, he co-founded RiskXchange, founded RockSec 360, and held global and revenue leadership roles scaling SaaS, cybersecurity, and fraud prevention companies from 1 million to 100 million worldwide. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, Simon Sharp.
Hi, Janice. Nice to meet you.
Well, it's great to have you. And we were just talking off recording, how long we keep bumping into one another. And I'm really delighted you in your current role to actually have you on the podcast. We've got so much to discuss that I'd like to get into and utilize your expertise, your ample expertise, Simon. So I hope you're ready.
Janice. You're too kind, honestly.
Okay, Simon. So you've helped multiple PE-backed SaaS companies. Now, when you look at what separates the firms from achieving predictable ARR growth and those that really stall, what are the biggest differences in the revenue architecture or GTM design?
Yeah, firstly, my philosophy is very much aligned with winning by design. You may be familiar with winning by design and the methodologies that they use around revenue architecture. I've been an ambassador actually for winning by design now for a few years, and I've recently become one of the founding members of the Growth Institute that Jacko and the team there have recently launched. So, I'm very much aligned to the fact that as much as there's definitely an art form to sales, I've always been, a salesperson myself over the last 20 years or so, and I've always seen that there is definitely a way of building relationships, and that's really where the art comes in. But ultimately, I think what's becoming more and more apparent to me over the years is that actually sales and go-to-market across the board should be treated more of a science than an art. So, when you treat things as more of a science, with the inputs and outputs and loops, then you become more systematic ultimately. So that leads to that predictability, repeatability, consistency that you were just referring to there. So scaling becomes much more scientific than relying on the art form itself. So I've always tried to align everything I do, certainly most recently over recent years, to that methodology.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. I've spoken to you before about ONG's data, and kind of that's a great resource that I use, and I scale assessments in order to uncover really where the gaps are in the system. And I know winning by design. I always remember the bow tie.
That's right, absolutely. Yeah. You can't forget the bow tie when
No, you can't. It's a really good image because it's imprinted in your mind, and I'm very much for using data informed decision making in everything that you do. But on the other side as well, I'm really very much about growing through your customers, and rather than being internally maybe a brilliant operation that's all aligned, internally focused organization, rather than being kind of from a outside in organization. So how do you reconcile those two aspects, being really aligned and firing on all cylinders and process orientated, to actually not forgetting the essential customer?
Oh, Janice, that's absolutely fundamental, right? And you touched on the bow tie there. So anybody who's not familiar with the bow tie is that, the traditional marketing funnel that everyone's aware of, you've got the top of funnel, the large awareness piece, and that funnels down into consideration and decision making. But ultimately, the way Winning by Design describe it is you flip that, 90 degrees onto its side, and then you've got that, that top half of the funnel that comes down to when you sign a contract with a customer. But then actually, that's when the real magic starts, right? A lot of companies, a lot of SaaS businesses put a lot of emphasis on marketing and new logo hunting, right? Which is obviously, you need new logos and, to bring more new customers in. But the real power of any SaaS business is what happens on the second half of the bow tie when it, post contract through, that early impact. The idea is to have fast impact, immediate impact for that customer once they've, signed up to your service. And then that bow tie expands again as you go through. And that is really, as I say, where the magic happens, because it's all about, particularly in a SaaS business, it's around that retention piece to make sure that everything you do is customer centric. So you meet the customer where they are. Everyone's buying in different ways. You need to make sure that you're in regular communication. All product innovation, is built through those close relationships, those regular touch points with your customers. And ultimately, if customers are happy and they're seeing value, then that's how you can really exponentially grow your business through expansion, retention, loyalty, referrals, community. That's the bit I always double down on. Is that customer centricity piece? Because without getting, into too much of the mathematics of it all, you have linear growth on the left side of the bow tie, so i.e. sort of pre-contract, but post-contract on the right side of the bow tie, that's when you get that non-linear compounding exponential growth. And that is because you've got that, those really happy customers that renew with you year over year. You're able to expand because you're able to service more and more use cases, more and more departments potentially. So you just essentially adding more and more value as a business to that customer, which makes sense, right? So then that's where you can really scale and grow your business predictably, consistently, and scalably ultimately.
Yeah, and this is what's often lost on organizations that are not necessarily SaaS-based businesses. And I've always focused on the right hand side, the retention, the rather than the acquisition, which is essential when you're a growing new organization, but it's hard for them to flip onto the other side. So I'm particularly interested in, the kind of the storytelling, the science, and the technology, and how AI reshapes how we target and engage so that we can forecast. So how do you look at that aspect of your work?
So AI, is obviously prevalent in everybody's world, like it or not, right, these days, and you have to adopt AI, and there's a huge amount of benefit with AI, right? I'm a big proponent of looking forward. How can we leverage the latest technologies? What we do actually in the company I'm CEO for at the moment, Verto, is we're building a lot of what we call Verto intelligence or AI into our product set, to be able to leverage agentic AI and other things, for the benefit, obviously reducing the friction and the cost, speed to impact, speed to value for our customers. But from a go-to-market perspective, we leverage AI all the time with research. So for our salespeople will use it for, expediting research into people that we're talking to make sure that the messaging is right for them. It's personalized, it's hyper personalized potentially, and we're all, people reach out to me all the time, and I'm sure the same with yourself, Janice. But if someone can reach out and they know, the value they can bring to you, and they know that, it's a conversation that you're going to get benefit from, then that's all goodness, right? And I think that's from both sides. So I very much encourage the team to leverage AI through that research. And then we use AI for things like call recording, so we can really get insights into certain conversations. I think most people are now familiar with the call recorders, the Otter.ai's, the Fireflies, even the Gong systems, those types of technologies that are really, really sophisticated. And they enable you to really become more and more efficient in those more admin tasks, but also get a lot of insights into what the customer's saying. What are you hitting those frameworks? So things like Medic, for example. Most organizations will have Medic or Spiced, potentially Winning by Design, or there's others that are obviously fairly similar. But the technology is that good these days where it can even tell you, are you asking the right questions? Are you really deep dive into the customer's pain points? Are you getting to the latent pain? It's not the surface problem potentially that the customer may have, but going deeper and deeper to really understand what the root cause is and how you can solve that. And I think that's where the real value comes from, and you're really then uncovering compelling events as well as critical events for the customer, which again is very, very useful from a sales perspective as well.
Yeah.
So we use technology like that all the time now, right? Just to help us become more efficient and more effective ultimately. And then we bleed into other technologies further downstream. We use, make a bit of a shout out, but we use technologies like Trumpet now, for example, which is a digital sales room, which makes it a lot easier to communicate at scale with individual customers. So you can record messages, videos, you can put case studies in there, you can put contracts. That's really helped speed things up for us. I must admit, there's lots of goodness that's come from that, and you can essentially say that you can reduce your average sales times by using that type of technology by sort of 30 to 50%, which is huge when you think you could reduce your sales cycle by that amount. So we make sure we leverage technology like that, and we have other tools like Cognizant for data enrichment, and we use LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and we're just basically trying to leverage HubSpot we use as well. So there's all these different types of tools that you can use that are embedding AI, and it's just becoming more and more sophisticated every day. So we just make sure that we're on top of that.
Okay, so we've talked about AI and we've talked about technology and a lot of the tools that organizations like yourself can use. I'd like to, there's lots of research around that even with AI, the biggest performance differentiator is still human mindset, motivation, adaptability. So do you see other CEOs investing enough in developing the human capability alongside the tech stack?
Yeah, well, 100%. So sales enablement coaching for us is big, So I think statistically, again, 30% of your time as a CRO or sales leader should be spent with your team coaching them. So, that's not doing forecast calls, that's not doing one-to-ones, that's, coaching the team, because that's your real differentiator. When we talk about AI, it is doing the lower level, the heavy lifting, speeding things up where possible, automation. But ultimately, what the real value that your team can bring is the skill set and the relationship building that they have. So we absolutely make sure that we double down on the coaching piece. From a CEO perspective, one of the key things, there's three key things that I always talk about, and that is one, having a very clear vision for the company. So all the people, everybody in the team, everybody in the company knows where are we going? Where are we going in the next 3, 5, 10 years of this organization? So I'm very, very clear on that, and is that an ARR target? What is it, right? So we make it very, very clear and simple to understand where we're going. So clear vision is first thing, and then you have the cultural element to the company. Culture is very, very important. It sets the tone, it sets the values, it's the behaviors that you expect people within your company to live up to ultimately, right? And we're all supporting each other, we're one team. And this really helps alignment, and a lot of companies that I've worked for, and I know this is can be a common challenge, is where you end up with silos across the organization. So marketing, sales, CS, product, nobody is necessarily talking to each other in a coherent way. Now, one of the things that I always double down on is making sure that there is no brick walls, there is no barriers. We are one team, one unit, everyone supporting each other. That alignment is key. And then that plays up to the culture and the behavioral values that we have as well. So it's super important that we have that. And the third thing is systems, right? So we've got the vision, the culture, and then we've got the systems, which we've touched on. But ultimately, I was at an event with Winning by Design recently, and Jacko mentioned it, and it was to go fast, you need, or speed, you need systems, right? So you're not shooting from the hip, you're not just sporadically going after new customers or having conversations that way. It's about having that system that enables you to go fast, so everybody knows what every step is in the sales process, everybody knows what to do next. And that's documented. We've got clear processes and procedures that are mapped out, and everybody knows the metrics that we measure every week to make sure there's leading indicators of success. We know we're heading in the right direction, and ultimately we can get to our goals at the end of the day. So again, I think I would distill it down to vision, clear vision, culture, and then the systems that underpin that.
Yeah, I love that, having those kind of three elements. And I really love that you focused on coaching when we're talking about the culture and the people, and how, a third of the time, how important that is, because the industry is used to coaching the deal, but not necessarily coaching the individual. And unless you that we know that a big impact of sales success is the human element, what's going on between here, those limiting beliefs. And although you can tell someone, in a deal, these are the things you need to go, if they've got various things holding them back, and it's not going to happen. So, which is why, I use a data-informed method through the sales assessment to help the managers and the leaders to understand what are the blocks in the individual to help them. So I'm really happy to hear that it's, that even as a CEO, coaching is such an important element rather than the training. So I'm interested in find out the difference for you as being in the CEO role compared to the CRO role. What are the key differences that you have found? Because you're using a lot of the CRO knowledge and experience. You've mentioned Winning by Design several times, but what are the things that the CEO, what's different?
So for me personally, the companies that I'm currently CEO of, of a company that, we've got a relatively small team of people. Okay, so Verto, we're about 25 people or so at this point in time, and growing fast and scaling and hiring. But we're at that stage where I'm very much, sleeves rolled up, in the trenches, so to speak, right? And I think I don't think you should get away from that. Even if you're in, an organization that's got, hundreds of, if not thousands of employees, you one of the things I try and do is get very close and go to meetings with our salespeople, as much as I possibly can, and get out to events. I'm there on the stand. I've been talking to our partners. I'm definitely talking to our existing customers. I go to our user community groups. We do community sessions at least, once a month, and I'm out, and I constantly say to my team, in my diary, you've got access to my diary, right? Let's make sure that I'm fully booked and I'm out there, as much as possible. And that's really for my benefit more than anything, right? Because you don't really understand, I don't think, the nuances in the trenches, when you're out there and you're actually a salesperson on the front line, unless you can actually see that world. It's very easy to sort of sit back and, you should be doing this and you should be doing that, which obviously I've got that experience to be able to do that. But ultimately, every company I've worked for is different, right? And everything, every time you speak to a customer, it's a different conversation. And I can bring that back if I'm hearing it firsthand to the strategy sessions that we do with the SLT, right? So it's about, where should we be going? How do we position ourselves? We've actually pivoted positioning wise over the last 12 months, from where we were before to, being a Verto being sort of maybe targeting more the project management layer, but we're now going up to a much more portfolio level or strategic initiative step, in the organizations. But I needed to hear that firsthand from our customers to be able to really understand where the true value is that we can then meet our customers with their needs. And as I say, then that enables me to very easily play that into strategic planning sessions and positioning and messaging and objection handling. And when you come back to the coaching, if you've been there and you've done it, you can have a much more sensible conversation than, just kind of relying on your intuition, or, you're kind of two steps removed sometimes from what's going on.
I mean, it's really interesting because it's making me feel that, this may be one of the downfalls of the CEO role, that they're not close enough to the customer, and you're really maintaining that happens, and you're growing through that extra knowledge and experience that you've got. And you've also got the power to change things really quickly.
Yeah, that's true.
But in your role, you've also got the funders above you that have a particular remit, whether it's 5-year plan to sell or whatever. So they want certain things to be achieved, and will be putting pressure on you to make sure you achieve them. So how do you balance that? You're very clear on what's going from you below. What about that, the pressure from above you? How are you managing that? And is it aligned to what who you are as a person?
I think, it's a good question, and we have very, very good and very solid relationships with our investors. So we're backed with Verto in particular. We're lucky to be backed by a London-based private equity firm called Scale Up Capital, and they are very easy to work with us, and we're lucky that they can give us lots of advice and leverage their expertise across many years of being in a private equity firm, but also across the other portfolio companies that they have. So I've been invited to events over the past 6 months where we bring sales leaders, CROs, CEOs from those various portfolio companies together, and then we organize coaching sessions for ourselves and talk through different ideas and way things work, and ultimately skilling everybody up. What tools are you using? Are you using Gong? Are you using Trumpet? Are you using this? Are you using that? What's the latest? So we get that sort of that broader benefit. But from from an individual perspective, I think the fact that I can actually speak with confidence that I've actually been there and I've spoken to the customers and I'm in weeds, as it were, that gives me a lot of confidence actually when you go into the boardroom, because you can then, you can really understand where you are with particular opportunities, expansion, goes, what new markets should we go into? What's the competition look like? What part of our business do we need to double down on more? Is it more, do we need more help with product innovation? Do we need to hire more people in that area based on what we're hearing? Do I need more marketing horsepower? Do I need new salespeople in the team? All those things, right? So it's all going through your mind. So I think, yes, there's a lot, and you've got to be careful to be able to manage your time, because obviously we've only got so much time in our day and you need to use that very wisely. That's a key thing, time management. But ultimately, I think it's a benefit getting closer to our customers when you're going into those board discussions, as I say, because you're more informed and you can play back what real life looks like through your own eyes, rather than relying on the team updating you, which they do, right? We have regularly updates, of course, but it's also good to put your own spin on it, I think.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Thank you for that. So, what's your personal value or belief that's helped to shape your approach to leadership?
So I think discipline trumps motivation, right? That's what my saying, if you like, right? So discipline, so motivation for anybody, particularly in sales, actually, motivation comes and goes, right? One day you might wake up and you're like, yeah, I'm going to crack it. I'm smashing it. I've got closed the deal. I can do it again. And then we all get those days, let's be honest, right, in sales where you wake up and you're like, I'm not really feeling it, or I've had a bad day yesterday. I just got rejection after rejection. I'm not sure if I can do this. You play and you hear those doubts in people's minds a lot. You read a lot about it on LinkedIn as well, right? I've seen many posts where you see people, even people I know, that you think that you've really on it. They're posting a lot. They're out there, and then you hear that actually they had a sort of almost like a mini crisis in their own mind, where it's like, this is tough, right? I'm not sure I can do this every day. So that's where motivation is not a good way of driving people to success, whereas discipline is something that you do regardless of how you feel in the moment. So if you're disciplined, you wake up on a Monday morning, right? You've got your map of things you want to do that day, that week. I've got I'm going to be calling 10 till 12. I'm going to be doing this at 1 o'clock. And by doing that relentlessly, that's when you get those results, right? So we can all see though, like sort of those hero sales guys and girls that close an amazing deal and then nothing happens for 3 months, right? Whereas the most successful salespeople are the ones that turn up consistently day in, day out, regardless of how they feel. But they're just, this is what I do, and I'm a professional, and I effectively grind through that. And ultimately, though, I know that I'm going to see the success at the end of it. So I always think that discipline is the best way of looking at things rather than motivation.
I think that's really interesting, because then it's kind of like discipline, it's habit forming, it's how you wake up and what you do every day, and when you do it. So how do you work with or cope with people that don't have that same sense of discipline? That's not the thing that kind of switches them on, but they're in your team or the part of your kind of leadership level.
Yeah. So, I think as you said it, Janice, actually, it's habit forming, isn't it? You may not see the benefits of it immediately, but if you can help and work with people to show them, we're just going to do this, slowly. We're going to just do this once a week. We're going to do this twice a week, and over time, those habits form. and then you start to see results. It's like going, the classic going to the gym analogy, isn't it? You sign up on the 1st of January, you're all at it, it's, I'm right, I'm going to smash it. And if you're motivated, you blast through the first 2 or 3 weeks, but then, motivation starts to wane, things get in the way, work takes over, whatever. And by the end of January, there's nobody in the gym, right? Whereas the ones that see the results over time are the ones that will go once, twice a week, and they just think, okay, this is part of my routine. This is what I do. This is who I am. They form that sort of growth mindset, and they're able to be a lot more level-headed about that, and they see results over a period of time. So I think it's really just, as you said, just kind of forming those habits, and then it becomes, second nature after a while.
I mean, I think that's a great analogy because, I am a gym bunny, but, there's a lot of times I don't feel like it and I feel amazing afterwards.
Yeah, exactly that.
It happens to us all. Yeah. Simon, this has been such a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. So how can listeners get hold of you?
Thanks, Jazz. Well, firstly, thanks for having me on. It's been a great conversation. Really appreciate it. Yeah, look, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm trying to be disciplined myself by posting a lot. So, stick with me. I'm trying to post every day at the moment. So hopefully the content's good and people are getting benefit from that. But yeah, please reach out to me I'm on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way to get hold of me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Simon, for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast. As always, I've loved the conversation.
Thanks, Janice.
If you enjoy this episode of Scale Your Sales podcast, explore other episodes of insightful guest conversations or watch the caption show on YouTube. Remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode filled with strategies to help you scale your sales. I love to hear your thoughts, so please share your views and leave a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more revenue generators just like you. So until next time, keep scaling your sales.